All right. We should be live, Chris. I believe we are live now. So, anybody who's in chat, let me know if you can hear us. But, yeah, I believe they can. Chris, you can hear me fine?
I can indeed. Brilliant to be
right.
on, brother.
Hey, man, it's such a great feeling to be here and have my first Games Talk Live here with you, of course. Man, when you told me you wanted to come on, I was like, so appreciative and glad that, for my first guest, having somebody that was there in the industry, of course. Tell people about yourself. Like, how many years were you with Sony Europe, and what kind of games were you behind?
Okay, yeah, but I just want to say thanks for having me. Obviously, absolutely privileged to be a part of your first show, so that's amazing to be here. I think a bit of background on me. So yeah, I worked for Sony Computer Entertainment Europe for about 14 years, I would say. And it was in a couple of different capacities, really. I first started as almost kind of like in QA, so I was a tester initially. And it was way back when Psygnosis was just about to be bought by Sony. And obviously a lot of games being tested were multi-platform at the time. So a lot of Crazy Ivan, Destruction Derby, Lander, lots of PC games from some time ago. And then I quickly moved into tech testing, really. So gaming rigs and stuff like that. I think when I started back in 93, was it? If I think back, I was kind of one of the few people who was building, rigs at home. It wasn't really it was super enthusiast back then. And it was one of the reasons why I got into Psygnosis, really, because they would do a lot of rig testing. And from there, really, I was a massive Formula One and motorsport fan. And a position came up for a game designer and at this time, it was about kind of a year and a half into being at Psygnosis. And a position came up, I went for it, obviously huge kind of F1 nerd and proper geeked out on the sport and landed a game design job and then just continued to kind of flourish from there in a kind of, I was going to say developer capacity. Obviously, there was a big debate a few weeks ago about whether QA is actually part of the development team. I'm a big, all for, a big yes, QA is part of a development team. They can do balancing as well as just testing for bugs and so on and so forth. So, but yeah, that was the start of my kind of, game dev, as a designer career then. So it was quite a quick kind of movement into that position.
Yeah, and you've been behind games like the F1 Racing Series, Wipeout, Killzone 2, I believe, as well.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So the majority was kind of the F1 series. So Bizarre Creations were the guys behind kind of F1 initially, and it was published by Psygnosis and Sony. And then obviously once the Sony acquisition occurred, it then came in the house and we started, F1 and all the way through to Championship Edition. And then once I think I spoke about it on the Lords podcast. So, once that kind of license came to an end, and there's obviously the talk about kind of MLB and stuff in recent weeks. It was one of those things where EA picked it up, and then the team had to kind of shift to new concepts and so on and so forth. So the team got split up a bit. I started kind of helping out on Wipeout and being a part of that. Then we started working on some concepts that were never released. They kind of gave birth to kind of Fury and stuff like that in the Wipeout series. But quickly after that, I got kind of seconded with a load of other people over to Amsterdam. So I went over to work with Guerrilla Games and work on Killzone 2 for about, I think it was about kind of almost 2 years over there. But that was a great experience and such a good kind of like multinational team over there in Amsterdam.
Right. So anyway, Chris, so would you say your time with Sony was a good time? Like you had a great time with Sony there?
Yeah, I mean, it's, being part of Sony was kind of, almost half of my life. And I know there's a lot of kind of fanboys and all sorts of narrative kind of on Twitter, which says that, like, we fell out and all of this kind of nonsense, which is, simply kind of untrue. I think it's a lot of people wanting, certain kind of news and beef to exist.
I think what it is when you say something that might criticize Sony, they want to say, oh, well, you're an automatic Xbox fanboy, or you are a disgruntled employee of Sony. Yeah, and that's just clearly not the case.
No. I mean, as I say, I've still got friends at Sony. Lots of people have chats with them there. And to be honest, in my Sony career, there was a large percentage of the guys within development who were original kind of Xbox OG, people. So we had those consoles when they came out. Yeah, we lived and breathed and developed on PlayStation consoles throughout the kind of, its lifespan. But there was a lot of like original Xbox fans, and we kind of, it was due to the games that were out. We made friends, and I think in gaming you move where with your friends. So if you've got a large portion of friends on PlayStation, then you're going to stay there.
Oh, it's true.
And if you've got them on Xbox, then you kind of move generationally together. But it doesn't mean that I don't play on PlayStation and like what the guys do there. But yeah, I think it's a narrative that just helps fanboys kind of create beef in social media circles, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. I got a few super chats here I want to get to before they go away. One from Gaz that says, "Fight me, Chris." I don't know what that's about, but that's between you and him. I don't want no part of that. Ramon Terrell, my good friend there as well, says, "Here's to kicking off a kick-ass first show, homie." Yeah, thank you very much. Also, I got one from Vincent. He says, "Love the setup. I'm excited to see more streams from you." I think that's an old one. Anyway, I got one from Shane Tomlin saying, "Here to show my support for the Fonz." Hey, all right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to do something a little different, and I'm going old school here with the index cards, okay? That's just I'm old school that way. I want to play a little game with you, Chris, just to sort of break the ice here a bit. This game, it's going to be 5 questions, okay? And these questions, most of them are purely subjective. However, as host, I do have the power to say whether you are correct or not, sir. Okay? No questions. I'm just telling you how it is. This is the game. And you know what? If you win this game and get all right, you win absolutely nothing, but at least we have a good time doing it. Okay? So here's the thing. I like to call this game 5 questions. All right. Enough of that. I hate that. Anyway, so, Chris, first question. What was your very first console?
It was probably one of the early Ataris. I can't remember what model it was. Which model was it? The kind of original, Pong machine.
Oh, you're talking about the original or the 2600?
Yeah, I think it was the 2600, or I can't remember it so far back. I mean, if we go to a bit more kind of modern consoles, then the first consoles me and my brother had was an NES and a Master System. We went down the route of getting both because we were obviously we could talk our parents into buying each one and then benefiting from games across the two of them.
Yeah, same thing with my brothers as well, man. And ours was the Atari 2600 as well. So you were right on that question.
Excellent.
All right, I agree with you. All right, next question. This could be a rock band question, okay? You ever play rock band? Okay.
Yes.
How many members were in the Beatles?
5, wasn't it? Was it 5?
Oh!
4?
Whoa! 4! Yes, it's 4.
Yeah, 4, sorry.
All right. You didn't even know that question. Oh, man, Chris.
I got nervous. I got nervous by these 5 questions coming at me.
Okay. Yeah, you didn't know this was coming.
John
this
Ringo,
is coming to
Paul,
every one of my guests, though. I'm going to have questions. We're going to play this game every time. All right, so true or false? The Nintendo GameCube was the last great Nintendo console. This is kind of a tricky question here because it's kind of subjective to me, but true or false?
I'm going to say it was a great console, but I'm going to say false because I'm having such a good time on the Switch, to be fair. So.
No, the Nintendo GameCube was, in fact, the last great Nintendo console. Got that wrong, sir. what was the best game last generation? What was the best game last generation?
For me, I'd say Red Dead 2 for me. I know people say it's too long and all of this nonsense, but yeah, definitely for me.
Yes, Red Dead 2. Red Dead 2. You got it right. I thought you were going to get that one wrong, but you got it right. All right. If you could have only one gaming experience throughout your entire lifetime, your entire gaming, history, what game would that be?
The one I always come back to for a gaming experience, it's GTA Vice City, and the reason being is just, I think
that's a good one. That's a good one.
I think the cast was great. Obviously, having Ray Liotta, kind of lead that. I think the soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks in a game ever.
Oh, I'm with you.
It was incredible, and I'd kind of love them to do a remake of that.
100%, man. Yeah, GTA Vice City was one of the best ones, that's for sure. Last question here. Actually, no, that was the last question. Yeah, that was it. So that game is over, Chris. Hey, at least you played along, and we had fun doing so.
We did indeed.
Got a couple of them. I didn't know you were going to say Red Dead 2, so that one, sir, respect.
It surprises me how many people kind of dislike it or say that it's too long, but I think it's an incredible experience.
Incredible, great story, all that. Fantastic. Let me get to a couple of super chats here that I got. Jeff Grubb is in the house. Holy crap. Jeff Grubb, thank you for stopping by. Jeff Grubb's Game Mess. He does that podcast. Great stuff there. He says, looking good. Obi-Wan says, Malaka to you too, sir. Aaron Summer says, congrats on the premiere show, Fonz. Can't read the rest here, but I missed it. Dang it. I'm sorry about that, Aaron. Also, Lord King David says, my man Fonz, hey, thank you for showing up, King. Really appreciate it. Anyways, back to you, Chris. So there's been a lot of blunders and stuff lately coming by way of Sony, at least some PR nightmares here and there. They've had some big articles written about Sony and stuff. And what's your whole feeling on how this generation has started so far for both Xbox and Sony?
Okay, well, I think Xbox have got momentum. I think obviously Phil is a guy who's got kind of complete backing from Microsoft. I think he's kind of proved he deserves to be where he's at. And I think now the kind of, the budgets have increased. I think Xbox kind of trying to move into the Amazon of gaming, so to speak, the kind of, with Game Pass, the having those kind of day and date big titles, we're seeing more third parties coming in. So I think Xbox have got great momentum. Obviously they've gone for the kind of the power narrative, which is something I commented on a few years ago. And I think that's what caused a lot of the angst amongst the fanboys a while ago. But yeah,
well, I just think the power narrative has always been a thing. I mean, we've seen the same thing happen at the beginning of, last generation with 1080p makes you a better gamer and all this stuff with the PlayStation 4. So, I mean, to a certain extent, power is always going to play some sort of role in all this stuff. But you're right that it's not everything, though.
No, I think it's kind of a good narrative for enthusiasts and non-casual gamers. People who really love gaming, early adopters, love hardware, etc. I think the casual gamer, the normal market, it's a price. And I think, Sony have stumbled a little bit. And I said last year that I thought Sony had kind of rested on the laurels in terms of what PS5 being put together. But I think if you think about the context that PS5 was supposed to kind of release, the previous year, I think, Sony were kind of on track with a decent machine. I think Microsoft kind of held the nerves a bit. Obviously, the pandemic kicked in and that caused all kinds of release schedules to go out the window. But yeah, I think it was important to Jason Arnold, Phil, all of the guys at Xbox to solidify their partnership with AMD, to utilize the latest technology, wafer RDNA 2 in its full capacity. And obviously Sony have got a bit of a track record of, putting their own things together, using their own technology and so on and so forth with Tempest and this, that, the other. I think the biggest issue Sony have got is obviously they've lost a kind of a games man in Sean. And whichever way you spin it, Jim Ryan is a numbers man. He's kind of like a numbers man by career, by default. Yeah. So he's looking at how do we make money? How do we make us as profitable as possible? And obviously that's going to have an impact on people like myself who love the kind of risky Sony. And I think I said this a few weeks ago on Twitter, is I kind of miss, the risky Sony. And I'm not saying that Sony doesn't exist. But this kind of third-person action banger, title, and then let's remaster, and then let's remake a remaster. That's purely kind of profitability, and it's kind of we need to make sure that we're going to have a win and a hit, and so on and so forth. And I think myself and other people have referred to Sony as trying to be kind of like the Marvel of games. Let's create that universe and create a universe of kind of bangers. And I think that's where kind of Sony are losing out slightly. I think that kind of riskier side to Sony is missing, and a lot of kind of gamers crave that side.
Well, and I want to interject here for just a second because you're talking on stuff that I personally really love about Sony. I do love those those third-person action adventure games that they do, and as do a lot of other people. However, the risk-taking here is something to really preach about, because if it's true and they're not, say, making a second Days Gone, a Days Gone 2, I think that's a risk that they should be taking, because it was a game that, sure, it had its bugs, it had its, some bad moments about the game. I think it was a little bit long in the tooth, if I had to say anything about it. I think the story just wasn't executed as well as it could have been. However, it's stuff that I feel that they could have rectified in a second game, in a second offering. And if they're not going to do that, it's kind of like a risk there that I wish that they would take, So kind of just upset about that. And it just goes along with what you're saying about the whole risk-taking thing. So
yeah, no, I agree with you. And as I say, don't get me wrong, I love those kind of like epic, adventures that they build. The Last of Us was probably, the original Last of Us was probably one of the greatest games I've played in terms of kind of atmosphere, setting, that whole, oh my God moment, for the first kind of, 30 minutes or whatever. But I think it kind of, lost its way a little bit in the sequel. I agree with you. I think the Days Gone guys have kind of earned enough to get a sequel. Obviously, the PC version's coming out soon, so they've obviously been confident enough to kind of let PC players experience that. And it's obviously going to be, as we've seen, it supports kind of ultra wide screen resolutions. It's had kind of massive improvements. And for me, especially as kind of PC hardware and current gen hardware, next gen hardware, are so close, whilst the team is kind of in that zone and stuff, let them explore a sequel. If we go all the way back to like the original GTAs, you play like the first GTA now, and it was great at its time, but it's so kind of poor when you start to look at the follow-ups and so on and so forth. And obviously I referenced, Vice City. But, things get better and better and better, iteratively, when you can listen to feedback from the players, you can kind of learn what went wrong, what didn't work, and so on and so forth.
True.
So I agree with you. I think they earned a sequel.
And let's add to the fact that, not every game has to be that third-person action adventure. Right now, I'm playing a game in Game Pass called Octopath Traveler, and I'm having a blast with that. And that thing is just like a sprite-based game. It's not really even anything to look at or write home about, but it's fun. And not every game has to be a looker to be fun. Not every game has to have some sort of expansive story even. You need to have a fun game. That's the bottom line with any video game, to me, is fun factor. You know, I do love story-driven games. They're my favorite. However, I'm not the only gamer in the world. Everybody has their preferences, and a lot of people love those sort of fun games that have no narrative at all. It's just, you know, blast away in some of these games, and I can respect that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think sometimes you need the kind of balance, don't you, of maybe, you know, a 3 or 4 hour game, you know, as you say, with no real, you know, major narrative. And I think that's I think that's what's successful about Game Pass, is that, you know, if we ignore all the nonsense of people saying it's filled with fodder and stuff like that, I think the guys at Xbox have, you know, they put together a catalog, you know, for a reason and on purpose. There's thought behind what goes in Game Pass. It's not, can we get, you know, this piece of like rubbish and can we put it with this great game and so on and so forth. There's thought about, okay, if people want to play, you know, a 20 to 30 hour kind of blockbuster, then they can. If people want to jump in and they've got 2 or 3 hours to play, then play Donut County or Rain on Your Parade. Or there's a reason why there's a mixture of titles in there. And I think if you look back at kind of old Sony, or Sony of yesteryear, you know, Twisted Metal, you know, Siphon Filter, you know, some of these kind of titles that have almost kind of been forgotten. I used to absolutely adore Siphon Filter, and it was almost kind of, you know, one of the games that created that kind of third person, you know, action kind of shooter. It was a cross between like SOCOM and a Metal Gear and so on and so forth. And it just feels like some of those, I'm not saying, you know, there isn't going to be like a risky title coming up.
No.
But it just feels like those type of titles are kind of taking second place over, you know, let's release a kind of a Last of Us or this, that, the other, which is, I think there's more to a games catalog than just those type of games.
Yeah, of course. And when it comes down to these remakes, like how many times are they going to remake or remaster The Last of Us? Like, I love that game. I love it. It's one of my favorite games of all time, but I don't care that they're remaking it. I really don't. Would I get it again? For sure, because I love the game. But that's the problem. It's like they know it's going to sell to these fans, these hardcore people out there. They're going to buy it anyway, regardless. But take those risks. Make something new. Give us a brand new IP. Ghost of Tsushima was one of the best games of last generation, in my opinion. A game like that out of the blue, I didn't have much hope for. But man, was that game amazing. And it's just like, continue that trend. Stop at the remakes, the remasters. Continue with these new big games. I know they cost money, but at the end of the day, you're making money, and you're also charging $10 more than the competition for your games. So it's like, you know, come on, throw us a bone here. Like, do something, you know, that we want to see, that gamers want to see.
Yeah, I do agree. I think you've got to be really careful about kind of game fatigue. And you know, for me personally, I absolutely loved, you know, the original kind of Spider-Man. But I had no interest of playing the kind of remaster. I'd kind of put so many hours into it. And it was a great game. And then it's kind of obviously Miles Morales. And then there's going to be, you know, no doubt Sony have, you know, tied up kind of the license, and there's going to be kind of another Spider-Man and so on and so forth. That's absolutely nothing to do with Insomniac. You know, absolutely incredible studio, the stuff that those guys do. But I'd love them to do something different for us. You know, I'd hate for a talented studio like that to just become a Spider-Man studio for Sony and just release the kind of same game after the same game and so on and so forth. Obviously, we've got Ratchet and Clank coming and so on and so forth. But, you know, those guys are so talented. You know, let's see something, something new from them.
Yeah, I think Insomniac is one of those teams, though. They're not going to sleep on them and just continue to make Spider-Man games. I'm sure they know that that's something that is going to sell well. And because, I mean, isn't that their biggest selling game right now is Spider-Man? Like, it is. The numbers have come out, and I think that's their biggest exclusive sales-wise, you know? And that's,
absolutely.
It's amazing. Miles Morales was a great little, you know, romp. It was like, I think I beat it in 6 hours. It was pretty quick, but it was a great little game. And honestly, some of the mechanics they added into that were even better than the original Spider-Man, I think. So I had fun with that. And it's a looker too, man. That thing is gorgeous. even without the ray tracing. Just the 60 frames alone just make that game so much better.
Yeah, an incredible studio, and as I say, there's nothing to say that they will become a Spider-Man or Ratchet only studio, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying I wouldn't want to see that because obviously, I know what it's like to kind of get dev fatigue. In terms of like the F1 series, we were kind of prepared that we were going to do 6 or 7 years of that thing, and I think your mindset's different if you're kind of like a FIFA studio or an MLB studio or an F1 studio, whatever. You have a different mindset because you start to kind of plan, your version, 2 as you're finishing off version 1, and you're always kind of looking at this staggered release. But I think if it was kind of like, you have to do this action adventure, then this action adventure, then this remaster, then this remake, and I think that's when you start losing devs, and that's not me, breaking news or anything saying that's what's going to happen to Insomniac, but they're a great studio.
That makes total sense, and you've come from that world, so you would know when a lot of people out here like to armchair dev, be an armchair developer, so to speak. They don't know how it really is. So, yeah, I can see that fatigue happening, and, you're one of the guys that could actually say that. Also, I'd like to say that I think that right now, this whole thing with how they're doing in terms of this, this generation compared to Xbox, I'd say Xbox is killing it in a lot of different ways from Sony. We know Sony's going to have the games like these big blockbuster AAA games, but what Microsoft are doing right now with Game Pass, I think a lot of people right now are starting to wake up to the idea of Game Pass and starting to wake up to say, hey, this is a really pro-consumer thing, and this is a really great thing for the industry, because it's where I see the industry going to the future anyway. I see more services opening up like this. However, I think what it's going to come down to is the fact that a lot of casual gamers out there, because let's face it, with these consoles, any console, most of the casuals will buy these consoles for their friends or for multi-plat games more than they are these exclusives. They really are. The numbers don't lie there. So what I'm saying is it's going to come down to a point where if Microsoft, and this is an if they keep pushing the direction of we're going to continue to get AAA blockbuster multi-plats within Game Pass, it's going to become a problem for not only Sony, but the rest of the guys. Because they're going to look at this and go, well, it's going to be coming down between, do I want to spend $70 on that game, or do I want to have Game Pass and have hundreds of games with Game Pass? Not only that one title, but I could see this happening. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think I said a while ago that we're coming to the end of kind of hardware generations, so I think PCs will carry on, and I think PCs will carry on, getting new hardware and kit, and people will build them and so on and so forth. And I think, there's always kind of an area of PC gaming, whether it's a specific kind of, series like an iRacing or something. There's always kind of something where, it lives well on a PC. But I think we're coming to the end of kind of hardware consoles. I'm not sure whether I think the next gen, I think the next gen will probably have hardware, but I think that'll be, the end of kind of hardware. I think we're moving to a kind of games as a service, and I think Xbox have kind of firmly planned for that. And I think Game Pass was, as you said, something that people thought was kind of anti-developer and anti-consumer, and you're renting games and this, that, the other. But on the flip side, these same people are fine with kind of paying for a Disney Plus subscription or a Netflix subscription, and not necessarily, physically owning the copy of that kind of TV show or film themselves.
We just had the Dirt 5 technical director on Game On Daily on Go Live yesterday, and he in fact said, and I tweeted this out, he was talking about how the engagement has really soared since they put Dirt 5 on Game Pass. And this isn't the first time we've seen a developer say something similar. And not even just that the engagement soars, also that, sales have gone up as well, being due to Game Pass as well, which is crazy to think, oh, well, if these guys are able to rent it within Game Pass, why is it selling more? Apparently it does. And again, when you look at the numbers, they don't lie, So it's one of those things that people are starting to respect Game Pass. And I really think Microsoft is going to push for bigger and better multi-plat titles within Game Pass. It's gonna happen. And,
Yeah,
I'm hearing
I do
rumors
agree
of
with
like,
that.
yeah, I'm hearing rumors of like Battlefield 6, and if something like that were to go into Game Pass, man, the numbers really would soar.
And I
mean,
think
it's crazy.
I think by the end of the year, I've had a couple of conversations that I'm not confident enough for me to come out and say this is a definite, but serious enough conversations for me to kind of take notice. But I think Uplay is going to come by the end of the year to Game Pass. I think it's a perfect model for Ubisoft, given the fact that they have lots of kind of transactions in the games and so on and so forth. They've got a huge back catalogue that people may have missed out on. That, as you say, the numbers don't lie. I think Mike, one of the creators of Yes Your Grace, he's argued many times about a successful game being hugely successful on sales, but then Game Pass kind of reboosting those engagements and increasing more sales and so on and so forth, which matches what David's saying at Cheshire Studio. And I think gamers nowadays, they have money and they want to spend the money. I think the problem is that if you think about how gaming's kind of changed, you used to go from like a demo, try before you buy model, all the way back into like the Spectrum days and so on and so forth, Commodore, and you get your little cassette, and then PC days you get your little disc on the magazine, and you try these games and go, I must buy that. And I think that's what Game Pass is doing.
I miss
if you
those
look
days.
Yeah, me too.
To a degree,
and I
you're
think,
right. But the thing about nowadays is the fact that they call them betas, right? And they give it out to us, and they let us try these betas, but it ends up being the demo because it comes out, and a lot of these games are broken and buggy anyway, just like the beta or the demo they showed us. And I don't know, Chris, I'm going to deviate a bit because, like I said, I want this more free-flowing and organic.
Fine, yeah.
This gets me to a point where it's like, as a developer, do you not see that more and more games nowadays are just releasing maybe a little too early? Do you think that's on the publisher end?
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the kind of negatives that have happened with connectivity, kind of always on gaming, so on and so forth, is that more and more devs try to kind of there's a mixture really. So I get why a dev will do kind of early access and stuff, because some developers who haven't got big publishers behind them use those early access periods to kind of fund the rest of the game. So they'll almost do a bit more than a vertical slice, but then early access allows them to kind of finish the game off and stuff. So I understand that from a kind of indie or like a self-publishing perspective. But I think when you've got big publishing houses kind of release an early access, or they release real kind of mental a bit like Village, you can play a demo between these hours on this day on you start to get into like a bit of kind of crazy town when you're looking at like new games. But I think it's allowed certain developers to have an easy way out. Let's release something which isn't final. Let's take people's money, let's patch it day one, or the day one patch didn't quite work. Let's continue to patch it, and hopefully our gamers and customers will stay with us for the ride. If you look at something like Cyberpunk, or you look at something like Outriders, as much as I absolutely love an Outriders, that was a mess, unfortunately. And I'm not saying those devs have kind of done that on purpose, but I think they've probably got to a point where they've kind of tested and kind of stress tested the servers as much as they can. And you kind of get to a point where you say, right, we need to chuck, millions of people at this to see whether, this is robust enough and so on and so forth. And I think Game Pass kind of allowed, a shed load of gamers to kind of hit that day one. And I mean, it's a huge stress test for them. And they've continued to try and fix it.
I think if it wasn't for Game Pass, that game might have got more bad press than it got. Even though it did get some bad press here and there, and a lot of gamers were upset about it. Like me, I played the game and I beat it, and I really enjoyed my time with it. However, there were some bugs and some things that happened while I was playing that it did cause me to lose that that immersive feel. And I didn't really get into it on some days because, like I said, sometimes the server issues would be a problem trying to get into games with friends and stuff. So I had my own issues with it, and I just, by the end, I just wanted to get it over with. Now, had I actually bought that game, I would have been really upset, but because it was in Game Pass and I got to experience it, I was like better with it. And I know it's not a good thing because you don't want to see games being buggy or whatever in even a rental service, say, as people like to call it. I still think that it would have just been, people would have been a little harsher on the game had they bought it, So
yeah, no, I agree. And I agree, and I think it was frustrating when you were in the middle of a kind of a mission or something, and you just get booted out. And obviously they kind of tidied that up eventually after a few weeks. And you've got to give credit to them in terms of they carried on, working hard and kind of hustling and trying to fix things. But I agree with you. I think it was kind of an easier bitter pill to swallow because it was kind of something that we were fortunate enough to have access to certainly on the Xbox side of things, and I think back to your original question. I think kind of Xbox have kind of I think the difference between Sony and Xbox at the minute for this gen is kind of Xbox have stuck to a narrative and a kind of plan of action. And it was around kind of, there was power there. There was kind of RDNA 2 hand in hand with AMD. There was kind of Game Pass to, Xbox knew that there weren't going to be a huge number of first party titles, to launch with Series X. We'd lost Halo and so on and so forth. So I think Xbox Game Pass has become more and more important, but Xbox have stuck to that kind of narrative. They've stayed on track and they've continued to kind of move forward. I think where PlayStation have stumbled and Sony is that the narrative has kind of flip-flopped. And I think, we look at the kind of, 360 to, PS3 days, then we look at the kind of Xbox One to PS4 days, and they seem to kind of, pass the ball back to each other and kind of stumble a little bit at the start. And I think, that the thing which has kind of harmed the more kind of down the middle gamer. So I'm not talking about the fanatics who, no one can do, no wrong and so on and so forth. But it's this kind of, we believe in generations. Then it was, it was almost kind of, you lost that. You lost a bit of that kind of, faith because they were just holding back the fact that, these games are still coming out on PS4. Then it was kind of like, we're going to kill, the kind of history of what we've done, by closing like Vita and other stores down. Then it was kind of like, we're not going to do that now, which is due to, the fans kind of shouting out about it, which is great. In the same regards as the fans shouted out about, Live Gold being free and it shouldn't be increased and stuff. But I think Sony's narrative has just been a little bit messy in terms of, what is the story, stick to that and actually be confident in sticking to it, not just because the issue Sony have got is they've got a huge fanatical fan base. And I think Jim's probably a little bit afraid to kind of, disrupt that fanatical, fan base, because we've seen it before. And it's not saying, that's every, Sony kind of gamer but we've seen people kind of threatening developers with like death and threatening Jim because he's made a different mistake and all this nonsense. So you can't, you kind of forgive them for not wanting to like rock the boat too much with their fan base. But I think that's the thing that's caused them to kind of be a little bit disjointed. Or should we do this? Or we can't quite do it yet. Should we? And I think Sony need to be a little bit more communicative and need to be a little bit more honest. And I think that would go a long way with the middle of the road, the gamers who like to game on multiple platforms.
I've said that for quite some time as well. It's like you got the execs over at Microsoft. They're always talking, they're always, sometimes a little too much, in my opinion, to their fan base. But they at least are more transparent at times, With Sony, it's like, they'll say something like, hey, we're going to take this store away from you guys for the Vita and PlayStation 3, and don't even let any of the developers know that are making games currently because as I heard back in March, when they made this announcement, the end of March, they were still selling dev kits to make games for the Vita in March. So it's just crazy to me that, they didn't say anything. And yeah, we should speak up as not only gamers, but consumers of these products. And we should speak up and tell people, hey, tell these businesses that, look, we're not going to have this, or, we don't like what you're doing here. And they will end up listening if enough people speak up. And that's why I always implore people to do so, because it's something that's major in the community. We do have a voice, and you see that. You see what people can do. And,
I totally agree.
Really good to see.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, this whole kind of SSD narrative on PlayStation, I'd much rather Sony come out and just say, we're getting, the right compatibility, we're doing this, we're doing that. Instead, people are just left to kind of, guess, when's this going to happen, what drive's going to use, so on and so forth. And it's great that they've obviously increased the support for kind of external drives. But on the flip side, that's also Sony's way of saying we're not quite ready with the SSD support yet. Yeah. So we'll give you
so strange
something else to kind of tick over, and at some point
and that's really weird to me, because it's not only just that, there's feature sets that should be in there that are not, like VRR is still not available for the PlayStation 5, which is just beyond me. And I know that they really haven't accepted VRR in their televisions, well, most of them anyway. I think they just now started to get the ball rolling on VRR with their television set. But it's just a weird feature, a big feature that you would feel that should be there day one on a next-gen console, so to speak. So anyway, I also want to talk a bit about this whole contract thing that came out between Capcom and, of course, Sony. This alleged contract speaks about parity. It speaks about a clause in there against putting the game in Game Pass, Resident Evil 8 or Village. What's your thoughts on this contract, Chris?
Okay, so I think, obviously, I don't think anyone's proved whether it's kind of real or not, have they, in terms of that particular contract. But it's, it's certainly something that is, it's nothing new. So kind of feature parity is something that, a lot of these kind of, deals will include. And I think the misconception with a lot of gamers out there is kind of the feature parity stuff. So we need to kind of think that in isolation about it being, actual feature. So in terms of, gameplay features, the product features, etc., it doesn't mean that if the performance of a PS5 version is worse, for example, I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying it doesn't mean if the PS5 drops frames, then the developer's going to have to kind of make the other versions drop frames and so on and so forth. And I think that's where a few people have got a little bit kind of crazy about, it doesn't perform well, so they're going to break it.
There's a little section in there that speaks on not the performance necessarily, but it says something about how the this is up to the capabilities of the machine or something. There's a piece in there that alludes to that. And a lot of people are running with this whole parity line saying that, this is just going to hold back innovation on the Series X or whatnot. And it's nothing to do with that. This is just basically saying, like, you can't have special features within the game that's not there on the PS5.
Yeah, correct. And it's to prevent things like, and not that any developer would do it, but it's almost to prevent, if you think about kind of a legal contract and you're putting together a specific publishing deal or marketing deal or whatever, you would have egg on your face if you didn't kind of, dot every I, cross every T. And as I say, not that a developer would do it, but you've left something out which allows a developer to kind of release a 1080p version, but like a 4K version on other machines, whether it's PC or console and so on and so forth. So I think people got a bit kind of het up and took that literally, as in kind of, right, well, if it drops 5 frames on here, they're going to have to make it drop 5 frames on Xbox and so on and so forth. It's nothing to do with that. It's just to do with kind of parity across the board. So you're making sure that you're not leaving something out, or there's DLC mentioned and so on and so forth. I think in terms of it can't be on Game Pass, I don't see why they wouldn't suggest something like that. I think if they're going to sit down with Capcom and pay a load of money for a marketing deal, and Capcom are fine with it, I think Sony would be in their right, and it would be a smart move to say, we're not doing this marketing deal with you guys, and on the run up, it's all kind of demos on PlayStation, and this is on PlayStation, and so on and so forth, and then day one, here we go, it's on Game Pass, and you've kind of you've done an MLB on us.
Exactly.
So I understand why Sony, if this contract is real, I understand why Sony will have done that. And to be honest, if I was kind of in charge of Sony, I'd be doing similar things, if we were paying a lot of money for kind of a marketing deal. The thing is in business, you always kind of suggest and try something. But all that's going to happen is you're either going to get a win, or Capcom are going to sit back and go, actually, we're not going to do that because of reasons X, Y, and Z. Now we'll find out whether this contract's genuine if Village comes out on Game Pass. There's no talk or rumors or anything of it coming out on Game Pass, so I don't think it will. But I think from a Sony perspective, if it is real, then it's a smart move and it's a sensible move. To be honest, it's something I would do. To try and avoid the kind of MLB issue.
This is the kind of thing that, when Jim Ryan spoke about how he had an answer for Game Pass, maybe this is one of those answers, who knows? But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to who has the deepest pockets between Microsoft and Sony in these multi-plat games. Because let's face it, money talks. If Microsoft wants a game in Game Pass, it'll be in Game Pass. For sure. I
agree.
Let's get on to another point here. I wanted to discuss a little bit about Metacritic with you. Metacritic. I know that this has been said to be pretty big within the industry as far as developers, publishers. They actually do look at Metacritic, and they give even bonuses out to the team sometimes if they get a certain Metacritic score. How much does Metacritic really influence the industry?
So Metacritic, certainly, obviously, I've got one toe in the industry in terms of people I know and people I speak to and so on and so forth. But I'm not developing in the games industry anymore at the moment. I'm on a different project. But certainly in my time, Metacritic was it was a rateable service that you kind of looked at your games, and it was something that you kind of set your sights on. The difference between my day and kind of current day development and games and targets are, Metacritic, it used to be around the 70 mark, so if you got a 70 plus score, then it was seen as kind of, a success. There's enough there for us to look at kind of a sequel or, an additional release and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I think over the years, I think the kind of, the voice of community, fanatics, fanboys, so on and so forth, have kind of pushed those Metacritic scores up to kind of be 75, then 80, 85, 90. And I think it's starting to get into kind of like an unrealistic realm.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think the problem I've got with Metacritic, and, people need to understand that kind of publishers and devs and so on and so forth, they're not looking at that kind of user score, because the user score has lost all credibility. Now, you look on kind of critic score, and say you get like an 85 or a 90 or something on critic score, and then your user scores at like 2, then that that's been marked down by a load of fanboys. There's been a big campaign over it and so on and so forth. So they can't realistically look at those.
I say just overlook user Metacritic scores.
Yeah.
They don't even, I don't even bother with them anymore because it's ridiculous the way they review bomb. But when it comes to the critic reviews, I actually have a problem with the critic reviews as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let me kind of explain this a bit, because I've tried to explain this to others before, and I just want to make sure I get the words right here. So the scaling system, you got the 100-point scaling system on Metacritic. Not everybody scales with a number system, and not everybody scales with a 10-point system, because a 10-point system, you can factor, 7 to a 70, 80, 8 to an 80, and so on. But those with a 5-point system, it doesn't correctly correlate, in my opinion, when you put it into a 10-point system or a 100-point system, because they'll take a 3 out of 5, which is a good game. A 3 out of 5, you would say, that's a good game. And it factors it into a 60 on the 100-point scale at Metacritic. And we know a 60 on a 100-point scaling system, everybody assumes 60 is terrible. Anything below a 70 is not a good game to a lot of people when they read Metacritic. But people don't know this. They don't really look at it. 3 out of 5 is a 60. That's crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
I agree.
Have a problem with that.
And you have some services. I mean, you look at Eurogamer or something who offer up a kind of recommend, avoid, or a nothing. So it's kind of how would you score them?
And they put a number on it.
Yeah. So I agree with you on that. The other thing I kind of disagree with the kind of critic side of things is obviously there's some fantastic kind of publications out there which are great. I think there's a lot of publications that are kind of classed as critics, but you will see them on certain games where it's got a huge kind of high score on a critic side of things, but then you've got this publication giving it like a 2 and saying it's like the worst game ever. And I think what happens in that situation is that it's just an easy way for that publication to get kind of eyes on, because they kind of sit in the worst category, and obviously the good reviews get the kind of little section of reviewers, but you suddenly got eyes on this. Well, why if they give it 2 and you click on it and they get some clicks and they get some So I think for me, ignore the kind of user scores. Obviously there's some genuine user scores there, but the majority are kind of review bomb. I think the only way of trying to create a solution for this on the critic side is go away, write your review, give it your score on your website. But I think there needs to be some type of mechanism where when it goes onto Metacritic, it almost like reaches back out to the reviewer and says, right, you need to score, you need to give it a Metacritic score. And they almost kind of ignore the fact if they've just got a recommend, don't recommend, and so on and so forth, or they've got a 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 scale.
Yeah, exactly. It's because to me, a 3, when you bring down a 60, brings down a score big time when you throw it in there. And to me, a 3 out of 5 should be at least a 70. Like it doesn't make sense in that scoring system. But hey, that's what they do. And
I know obviously
Metacritic. I've always found it weird.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, and I know Metacritic is this kind of automated service of like trawling, seeing these kind of critic reviews and doing things automatically. But I think if you start to look at kind of developers being penalized for scores, you start to look at kind of user review bombs, and Metacritic, is the kind of the catalyst that everyone kind of sets their goals upon. Then why not ask these critic sites to do a little bit more? Okay, well, great, we've picked this up. Before it gets published and your score goes in, we need you to follow this link and give us a score between 1 and 100 or whatever, and let them kind of rehash their score into a percentage that they think it's credible at, because you'll find that the kind of 1 to 5s and someone gives a 3, you're right, they will go on and go, well, actually in this bracket it was a 70 or it was whatever it was, and
60,
and you get a little bit more of a realistic score. But it's one of those services which is polarizing in the kind of in the industry and in social media.
Yeah, Chris, you know what else is polarizing? Metal Gear and Kojima. Metal Gear is said to make a possible comeback. People are saying that it might be either up for sale, the license, or rented out by Konami. What's your thoughts on this, Metal Gear? Do you think it's true?
I'm not sure. I think obviously there's a lot of kind of rumors flying around. I think, is the Kojima rumor, causing people to kind of, put two and two together and think that Metal Gear is wrong. Obviously, Metal Gear is a great series, and why wouldn't you, look at bringing it back? I know Konami kind of like killed it off, didn't they? I think Kojima kind of moving on and the falling out and so on and so forth.
Yeah, they put it into pachinko machines and stuff, and
it was not necessarily the treatment that it deserved. I mean, I'm a big fan of like the original Metal Gears. When it first came out, it was kind of revolutionary. It was like an awesome game. Then it kind of got a bit. And as much as I like
weird.
Kojima,
weird, yeah.
And as much as I like Kojima, I think he's, we all say it. I don't think this has offended him. He's a frustrated movie director, isn't he? So he's got such a great imagination and mind. And I think I've said this before to loads of people. I would pay week in, week out to watch a Kojima movie. I would absolutely go to the cinema and watch anything that he made. I think his storytelling and his kind of environments and his creations are amazing. I think sometimes, that gets in the way of good gameplay. But that's not to say, Death Stranding is a fascinating game. The later Metal Gear Solids were kind of not my favorite. I was more of an original fan. I'd love to see it come back. I'd love to see it come back in some shape or form. As I've kind of Xbox picked it up and Kojima's, helping them out on it. I don't know. I think that may be just a lot of kind of people hoping that's the case. But does Kojima want to pick it back up, or would he rather do his own projects? That's the question I would be asking.
Or money talks. Maybe Xbox is paying him to do some Metal Gear. And that would be fascinating. But before we get out of here, Chris, I just want to read some of these super chats because I hate these to go away like this. So I'm going to read some of these, see if they have any questions for us here. Okay, so I have one here from Kay Asante. I hope I'm not butchering that. It says, here to show some love, Fonz, on your first show. Chris, I always love your insight. Sorry I'm late. ILP ran a bit late. No problem.
That's cool. Appreciate.
Chris, I'm sure appreciates that too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
USO Vinny says, I was waiting for the show all week. Also, love where Xbox is right now. It will only get better as time continues. Yeah, if they keep doing what they're doing right now, I agree. Mass Erect. He's from ILP, I can tell by the name. Here to show some love. Thank you. Appreciate that. Brigadier Blue says, loving the live stream, Fonz, and give Grannell a big thanks from me for all the great games he's helped make in the past. That's nice.
Huge. Thank you very much.
Lord Sovereign says, can't stay live because Lady Sov will kill me. LOL, but I just wanted to show some love to Lord CJ Grannell and my brother Jay Fonz. Great work. And then Gunny 672 just sends a 10 spot and says, here you go. Thank you very much, Gunny. Didn't have to do that, but thank you. Iron Lords podcast, man, I appreciate those guys. They came through, said, proud of my brother Lord Fonz starting his new endeavor. Salute to Lord CJ for his knowledge in the industry. Both cool UFC fans. I didn't know you were a UFC fan. That's awesome.
Yeah, I enjoyed last night's fight. I didn't enjoy.
It was really good last night. Really
I didn't enjoy the leg break, but I don't think anyone did.
Oh man, that kick to the head by Rose was amazing. It was great to see Usman do his thing, knock out Masvidal. It was great. Great fights. Gaming Forte says, "Hey Fonz, here to sow the best voice in podcast show." I think he meant to say the best voice in podcasts. Some love. Keep up the great work, and I hope to be on your level one day. You're already on my level, Forte. I'm nobody, but I appreciate it, man. Seriously, you guys are awesome. Everybody who showed up today, I'm really shocked so many people showed up. I didn't realize this many people would show. I really didn't, Chris. I wasn't expecting this at all. I'm beside myself, honestly. Randall Thor says, congrats to your first episode, Fonz. You are a great friend, brother. Only a matter of time till Games Talk Live is bigger than Xbox 2. I don't think so, but I appreciate you very, very much. And again, I'll be doing this every couple of weeks with a new guest. Chris was fantastic today. Chris, seriously, time went by so fast, but the show is over. It's done. We've already talked for an hour. It's so fast. But I know you just got your COVID shot and everything, your second one. I'm glad you're not feeling much effects from it. I'm glad you were here, able to make it today, because, man, I appreciate you so much for being my first guest on Games Talk Live. Appreciate it, brother. Appreciate it.
No, absolutely amazing to be invited on. Obviously, I've always been a fan. We've always chatted. I know we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks as we started planning things. So, you deserve to have a great show. And actually, I'm gonna leave you with a little present, which I haven't spoken to you about. So, obviously, at the moment, I'm obviously doing different things outside the games industry at the minute, and I've got my own business, and we're doing that side of things. But
nice.
I just want to let you know and the guys here that there's a concept that's been close to my heart, a games concept.
Oh, really?
And I'm resurrecting it. So I'm starting to work on the concept again. It's I do want to kind of get back into gaming, and I want to kind of try and realize this concept. So it's nothing that's going to kind of appear anytime soon, but I'll start to kind of drip feed details and try to get people's feedback and stuff. But I thought, what better way to save it for your show, having me on.
I appreciate that.
And I'll kind of
Chris
drip
Grannell
feed
is
that
going to be
little
starting
gem.
on a game. Yes. Chris is going to be starting on another game. Awesome. I appreciate that, and I like the little tidbit you gave me here, and I would love to hear more about it in the future, and of course have you back again, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Come back, and it'll be great to be back on. I'll speak to you kind of in private about what the project is, and then we'll obviously kind of feed it out to people as and when the time's right. But
I keep my lips are sealed, so I appreciate you.
No, but I really appreciate you having me on anyway.
Show some love, dude. Anytime. Just want to get these last two. Want to show some love? You are an inspiration from the wise old gamer. Eternal Shaddai says, Fonz, happy to see you. Happy for your first episode. Wishing you the best. Mass Erect again. Great first show, Fonz. Very inspirational. That's the word of the day, I guess. I'm seeing inspirational. I'm really humbled by you guys. Thank you very much. And I'm really humbled by Chris to let us all know here live that he's going to be working on a game again. Awesome, Chris. I'm really freaking happy about that. And I can't wait to hear more. Thank you guys for coming out to the first episode of Games Talk Live. Again, Chris, if you'd like to say anything where people can find you, anything, just go ahead and say it now.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. Really humbled to be on your first episode. Yeah, if people can find me, CJ Grannell on Twitter, Hard Times UK on Xbox and PSN and Switch and Oculus and whatever. So yeah, just really made up to be on. I think you're going to kill it with your Games Talk Live podcast. And thanks again, mate. You deserve it.
Appreciate it. All right, guys, that is our time for today. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks. At least I will, with a new guest on Games Talk Live here. So I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out to see this. As always, man, game on, guys.